Welcome to Westbury Analytics Radio, where ServiceNow performance analytics for senior executives comes alive. Experienced ServiceNow architects, performance management experts, and other executives in your field share insights for how to drive performance management using the power of ServiceNow performance analytics. Performance analytics is a game changer, but it requires a different way of thinking than how most people think about reporting and performance measurement. Our goal here is to help you develop that new way of thinking. I am your host, Pedro Soto.
Hello, everybody. This is Pedro Soto, welcoming back our listeners to another episode of Westbury Analytics Talk Radio. So today's special guest is Bart Schouw. Bart has held various leadership roles in the IT area for over 30 years, and currently he's with the Office of the CTO at Software AG as Chief Evangelist, where he leads the effort to differentiate the value that Software AG brings to the market. And one of the things he's focusing on nowadays is this concept of the connected customer experience, which we're going to talk about today. But before we dive into it, Bart, will you please tell our audience a little bit more about you and Software AG?
Yes, of course, Pedro. Thanks for having me on the call. Yes, so as you said, 30 years in IT, did various roles. After my study business administration, I started actually as a programmer. It was a very hard time, and I got actually completely fed up with business administration. I had to read so many management books that I didn't want to have to do anything with it anymore. And I conveniently became a programmer, and I worked my way through it. You know, I really liked programming at that time. I wasn't a digital native like anybody else. We had to learn programming, which was an alien thing to do. Became an analyst, head of analyst, was working in the banking sector, learned about real-time analytics. And there I lost my heart. Real-time analytics was really something that I thought was on the forefront of changing the world as we know it.
Yes.
And since then, I'm still busy with it on to see how that actually influences the way we do our business. We might come back later on to that. But basically, that drove me in various roles, and I started to work at a certain moment for Software AG, where I was involved in the IoT strategy. And since the last 5 years, I've been really working on defining an IoT strategy with a small team, executing on it, and really bring it to market. And we now figure out nowadays that this has a lot to do with customer experience and what we call nowadays connected customer experience.
Yep. But you have a very, very unique and very well-defined concept of that little word before, right? Because everybody talks about customer experience, rightly so, but you say connected customer experience. Tell us more about that, because that's really fascinating what you were sharing with me earlier.
Yes. So when we look actually at today's brands, they're really challenged to anticipate what the customer expects, isn't it? So they're really thinking on how to interact on every channel and anticipate the needs at every phase of the customer journey. And this was, of course, triggered in the last 10 years by the mobile revolution. But I think there's a flaw in that customers don't think about channels. They think about what they need to get done, you know? The idea of separate channels doesn't exist. So
that's right.
Rather than thinking about unified customer experience, it's really now the challenge of how do I actually define a deeply personal relationship. And that is really pushing, I think, a lot of the companies on this digital journey. And in order to give this connected customer experience, a deeply personal experience, I think companies are also forced to become connected. And this is what we ourselves define as truly connected. Yeah.
So, and you mentioned something in our earlier conversation as we were preparing for our call today, this concept of the fractured enterprise. Tell us more about that, because that is really the insight you guys bring to that concept is very interesting.
Yeah, yes. So let's take this. So when we say that you have a connected customer experience to deliver, and when we then define that you have to become as a company truly connected as well in order to do so, then there are a number of questions actually to ask yourself, isn't it? If you want to step back, then you have to step back actually from the question. I think a little bit like Einstein, isn't it? Einstein said something, and I really like that. If you have an hour to find a solution to a question, then I like 55 minutes of my time to really understand that question before addressing it. And I think this is, I think we should do the same thing over here as well. So, a truly connected enterprise actually then has also then the flip side saying, if I'm not truly connected yet, what am I? Okay, and then the question can be raised, well, okay, what is that? And we define it actually as fractured, a fractured enterprise. Now, some people might argue that a truly connected enterprise is a company that is born digitally, that is like the digital disruptors we see running around, because those digital disruptors, like a Tesla, they have this connected customer experience already embodied, isn't it? For instance, I love this example, and I'm not sure if you know it, but there was this tweet. There was this tweet from a guy called Paul Franks. And he tweeted a few years ago to Elon Musk. He said something like, hey, every time I step out, I hit my steering wheel and it's wearing. Couldn't you conveniently lift my steering wheel up before I get out of the car? Yeah, and strangely enough, Elon Musk answered, yeah, why not? Great idea.
Wow.
We'll put it in there. And a lot of people were skeptically about it, but 4 months after, in the software update of all Teslas, I believe it was 8.2 update, something like that, it was in. They put it in.
Interesting.
Now, can you imagine, that a Mercedes-Benz CEO would tweet on such customers' requests? And then even if he would tweet, what would be his response? You have great idea. I'll put it in the next version of my car in 4 years' time. And it is not an exception, because a few months later, a certain John Ashley asked for a dog mode, saying, I want to keep my dog in the car, but I don't want people to smash the window. So couldn't you put on the display saying the temperature of the car and that I will be back in a few minutes and that my dog is fine? And again, Ellen tweeted just yes. and again, 4 months later, they had this dog mode. You can look it up. It's all on the internet. You can find it. And I think that kind of that truly connectedness, where you can take that customer experience first and then all the way bring it down into your products through software, to digital, that is what people are looking for, and that is actually what's defining value. Because you know it probably as well, Tesla just reached 150 billion market cap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. General Motors only has 50 billion, but General Motors is producing 7 million cars, and Tesla only 400,000 cars. So that's a 60 times difference in the valuation. And the only reason can be because they're seen as a technology company, not as a car company anymore. So a truly connected experience can be reached as a digital disruptor, but then the question becomes, well, but if I'm not born in this digital world, if I'm not a digital native company, if I'm from before that, is there this possibility for me to reach that kind of nirvana as well? And then that is so that was an interesting question for us to consider. Said, is that possible actually? Can you be born in the age before? Difficult, because we spoke also to IDC on this, and IDC has actually a very interesting research, and they figured out that there are about 5% of all companies have reached digital disruptor status according to their research. And so that's not many, is it? And they say 16% is resisting anything digital. Okay, I can't imagine which companies, but apparently still 1/5 of all companies says, digital, not my cup of tea. But everything in between then, as a conclusion, is struggling to get there. And why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to be there? And we figured out that it's because of this fracture. And the fractures are very, very simple. Okay, so the fractures, for instance, and I think that you will like this because I know you are very, very, the whole idea of KPIs is very much core to what you guys are doing, is that if you, the strategy, so the idea is in a digital disruptor is that cost and quality is no longer the most prevalent point to actually compete on. It's really data. You know, you're really competing on data. So then how quickly can I use data to get value? You know, to improve operational excellence, bring innovative business models to market, to improve customer experience and disrupt competitors. So so there are many companies looking for this kind of insight strategies. You know, so how can I drive data to value? How can I drive data to insight? So real-time capture analysis of data, and then driving those insight and getting those advantages. And that is hard because the strategies in old companies are often split between business and IT. And that is hard also because IT is looking at these kind of things fundamentally different than business. And the reasons, let's discuss it a little bit. So IT, for instance, is trying to modernize back office applications, okay? And they think about agile methodologies and they're bringing applications to the cloud. You know, they're all trying to do those things. But while they might seem innovative, cost reduction is often the main goal. You know, because 80% of all the budgets are just spent on keeping the lights on. And the IT is often a part of the CIO, and the CIO is often reporting to the CFO. So it's often a financial function. Yeah, it's just maintaining cost. It's maintaining status quo with us for a low cost point. And those projects are often long timelines, and they don't then adhere to the more immediate needs of the business. So IT is managed on cost. KPIs are just on keep the engine running for a low cost as possible. And then business has impatient business leaders that are looking actually to address market needs and challenges as quickly as possible. So their KPIs is trying to get this customer experience in there and to delight their customers as quickly as possible. And if that then isn't adhered to by these long timelines of IT, what they do now is because they have they're digital savvy now, they take some digital technologies, self-service cloud applications, they take the credit card and buy something in the cloud. And there we have it, shadow IT. And it will solve an immediate need of the business, but on the long run, if this not is governed by the IT, you know, you see there's big imperfections because those applications might have security breaches, they might not scale, they can stop working altogether, and in the end they leave it to IT to maintain it. Creating even a bigger burden for IT.
That's a very, very good synopsis of what's happening in this transition to a digital world.
Yeah, and this is what we call the fractured enterprise.
That's what
that's what we call a fractured enterprise. And now the question is, how can I overcome that? And we think that it is possible, and it has to be. And I think my preferred example, it's not a customer of Software AG, but my preferred example actually is of what I love as what they're doing is the Transport for London. Okay.
Who? I'm sorry?
The Transport for London, TfL. TfL, okay. Transport for London, the guys that run the tube.
Oh, got you. Transport for London, TfL, got you. Yeah, tell us, what have you observed there?
Yeah, what I have observed there. Okay, so now if I talk about the London Underground, to anyone, especially ones in the UK, people start to moan, because because it's really if you use it, it is crowdy, it's smelly, it's in all kinds not the kind of service you would like.
Right.
At the same time, you have to adhere that there's probably no better, faster, cheaper alternative traveling through London.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I'm with you on that.
They're transporting 1.4 billion people every
A year?
year.
Wow.
And those passengers make 12.6 billion kilometers. And they do that only with 4,000 carriages on 11 lines, which are only 402 kilometers in total length. Just try to think what it would mean if those people would take the car or anything else. It wouldn't be possible.
No.
So also, it wouldn't be possible to build a whole new infrastructure. It would be crazy. It would be way too expensive. They can't rip it out and digitally replace it. It's no way.
Yep.
Now, let's step a little bit back on this. Okay, so the first tube was opened in, I believe, 1863.
1863?
1863. So 150 years old by far.
Yep.
Now, just a question to you. When do you think they came out with the London Tube map? The most famous one that everybody always thinks about graphically.
Right.
When do you think they came out with that one?
I'm going to guess the 80s. The 1980s.
No, not 1980. So 1933.
Oh, okay.
So 80 years after opening the London Tube, they figured out that they needed a map for it. Yeah. So I always wondered then how people understood how to travel with the tube before. So
for 80 years.
Yeah. So, but it actually improved the customer experience probably already, isn't it? Yeah. Now, what did the London Tube organization TfL do about 10 years? In 2010, 10 years ago, they started a customer experience improvement project, and they called it the Open Data Initiative. And what they did, so what they did, they provide now, I think, 75% of all the data they generate on the tube, they make it available through APIs. And they right now have about 80 data feeds. And they're all about operational and corporate information across across all the transport.
Okay.
And what happened is, because this is open data, there are now more than 600 mobile applications powered by those feeds, and they are used by about 42% of all Londoners. Yeah, and on the website it's even higher. 83% of all Londoners using their websites, and it helps customers to understand how the tubes are operating, but it also helps them to understand how to connect from the tube to other means of transport. So it's bigger than the London transport itself now, but it tells also organizations about air pollution. It helps governments to do infrastructure planning, and it gives work to literally thousands of people. And now here comes my point. Like the London Tube map is giving you an understanding what the best way to travel from A to B, this new digital infrastructure gives them the insight to spot opportunities, to operationalize data, to allow them to create the best customer experience. Best customer experience. And if a 150-year-old company like the TfL can do that, I think every company should be able. Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing. They didn't throw out the drive to lower costs. That also, I'm sure, has been impacted by the way they've unleashed the data.
Yeah, it's even more interesting because the Deloitte analyzed this, and they estimate that the TfL spends about £1 million a year on running this data platform.
Yeah.
But they estimate the return to be about £130 million a year.
So about £1 million hard cost, right? Because that can be counted going out. but they've been able to see $130 million return.
A return in better customer experience and value for their customers.
So,
Yeah.
so that's really key, right? Because when you start talking about, customer experience, keeping costs down, I think there's a knee-jerk reaction from executives to say, oh no, okay, here goes the bank. We're going to break the bank to build a better customer experience. But that's not the case.
Correct. And we see that a lot, that the executives are very afraid for such projects because they don't see the direct return, but they see a direct cost. Oh, this is cutting away from my bottom line. What am I getting out of this? So you see this then does this stress of the organization to come up with business cases up front. But these kind of innovations are so radical that they can't estimate what the benefits will be. They only will find it out on the journey towards. And time after time, and we probably don't have time for this in this podcast, but I have spoken to so many customers that went out and started to do this, and they figured out during the journey that the real value wasn't what they actually estimated at the beginning, but they found something during that journey. They found some value in the data that they didn't see coming
before,
but which gave them a return within weeks. So and we see those kind of examples each and every time.
Okay, so let me just drill on that a little bit, right? Because you've brought up a fascinating point. It's unlikely, in all honesty and integrity, to come up with business cases for these kinds of digital undertakings. And you just said, and maybe we'll have a podcast 2.0 to look at some of those examples where you have spoken with folks like you shared, that they really kind of started and discovered something that they had not even anticipated or thought of, that just made the business case just a no-brainer. The return on investment was just off the charts. So knowing that, what does it take? What kind of temperament from the executives does it take to embark on what, from a very cost accounting, numbers and cents perspective, is a wild expedition?
Yeah, so I spoke actually to a company, a food company, who has actually figured this out themselves. And what they now have, they have a fixed budget every year, discretionary budget for the managers to spend on those kind of projects where they don't need any kind of signatures. If they think that there is a valid case to make, don't have to prove it up front. The only thing they have to show is that they measured the before situation, measured the after situation, so they can define the delta. And if that delta is good enough, then they continue, and otherwise they stop. They fail early.
Right.
And
no penalties, right?
No penalties. They are allowed to fail. This is just budget that is there for them to experiment, to innovate, but keep the pace, keep the momentum. Go, go, go. Don't waste time.
Awesome.
Don't waste time to try to get these approvals, because then the momentum might gone, the opportunity might have gone. If you see an opportunity, try it, but please, please, please measure before and after. Yeah. So I think that's a very interesting one. Just to give you a case on this, because I just remembered something in back of one of the very first cases where we were involved was a company that was providing no breaks for electricity. So if you have a very crucial kind of infrastructure like an airport, then you have all kinds of no breaks over there, that if your energy is disrupted, those things fire up, and they run.
Got it.
Now, it's a very competitive market, so the way they actually have to compete is in providing uptime of those things. They have to guarantee 99.999%.
5 nines or something.
Incredible. The only way to do that is by putting in place predictive maintenance.
Right.
So, so they what they normally do over there. So they started to actually connect those machines up and to monitor those machines with all kind of sensors, and what they didn't figure out, but what became clear, was that they actually could, on that journey, okay. So they had some all kind of other ideas how they could make the business case, but in the journey they actually could figure out that they could actually monitor the spark plugs on wear and tear of the spark plugs. It became clear that they could actually predict the wear and tear on a spark plug and how long the lifetime would be and how long it would run. Now, before they would actually had this system in place, they had to replace every spark plug on such a machine. Such a machine has 20 spark plugs, and a spark plug normally on such a machine costs 150 euros. Count out how much they would actually just replace on a single, just to make sure that this thing was running. But now, by being able to predict the lifetime, they could just pick out the ones that wouldn't make it until next inspection. And that insight paid for the whole project. That one insight, and they didn't know it before they started.
They didn't know it.
They didn't know.
That's a great example.
Yeah, and every time I speak to customers, if it's in railway or whatever, they always come up with those cases. Said we didn't know that it would happen to us, but it happened. There's insight in this data that you don't know before you start. Yeah. So yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm sorry, Bart, if we take it even further back, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a smart thing in today's day and age to have a serious commitment to leveraging the data that your business produces. Right?
Yes, absolutely. But you have to, like you said, it has to be a smart commitment, because the one thing I see often happening, and which really brings down the value, is that there is there's an over expectation, and there is this kind of idea, oh, we can manage that. There is so much hype around it, especially around AI and the value of AI. But what I see is that many companies are having kind of this expectation, which is that they immediately want to go for the holy grail. They want to go for this AI kind of based business, so they want to go for 0 to 100. And do those things like predictive maintenance based on AI models and machine learning, where they before didn't do anything of that. And if you then try to do that, it becomes such a complex undertaking that the learning curve becomes so steep that people often fail on it.
Yeah.
So it is like a maturity model where you have to learn to crawl before you can walk, before you can run. And AI-based business is really running. It's like this 100-meter champion. You have to become the Usain Bolt on that. So before you actually get into this model-driven world, this analytical AI model-driven world, you have to do some steps before. And I call that becoming data-driven before you can become process-driven, before you can become model-driven. And what I mean with that, it's data-driven is that you learn to trust your data. Okay, you have to be able to capture data in such a way that you can trust it. If I would take a report out of your business right now and ask you to make a decision on it, and if that is impacting your business, would you trust that data, yes or no?
I'd say that a lot of executives, I can answer that for you.
Wouldn't trust
a lot
the
of
data.
executives,
So if they don't trust the data, how can an AI trust that data? You know, and how can you then trust the AI? So you have to start understanding, how do I capture data? How do I analyze it? How do I visualize it? And then that visualization is giving you the first insights that operators now start making decisions on it. And if you then trust those decisions, then you might want to get to the next stage where you say, okay, let's automate some of those decisions in validating some processes. So start a process based on this through this kind of a triggering, and then let the organization learn how to do this kind of decisions at scale. And only when you do that, then you can go further and say, okay, let's now automate those processes where operators make those decisions to the point that an AI can make this decision. And that's a journey not of weeks, of months, that's a few years, but you have to become data-driven first. And that's normally where we start. And data-driven, you can become fast. It's only, you can do that in weeks, months.
Yeah.
But that gives you this kind of quick win, this trust of the executives. Do you say, let's measure before and after, let's get this success going and then grow that. And that's what we see, that's the first steps on healing your fractured enterprise and getting into the truly connected world.
Oh, that is awesome. Bart, this is one of the most insightful conversations I've had in the podcast, and we've been doing this for several months already. I know we could continue going on here because I've been learning so much. So we'll have to have you back if you'll accept our invitation, because there's a
By
lot.
all means, I would love to. There's so many more things to discuss.
Yes, there are. So to wrap up here, and I'll take you up on being open to come back on the podcast. But to wrap up, those listeners that are really, really captured by some of the insights you've shared today, what would you say to get in touch with you, to look up the company that you work with, if they want to learn more? Obviously, as an evangelist, you want to share all this knowledge with them.
Yes, absolutely. So they can always connect on me on LinkedIn. You can find me as Bart Schouw on LinkedIn. That's always fine. I'm working right now on a dedicated URL called the Truly Connected Enterprise. Right now, it's still actually linking back to our own company, Soft AG, but very soon we have a dedicated environment for the Truly Connected Enterprise, where you can start your journey to actually understand what it takes to become truly connected.
Okay, excellent. It's a good start. The Truly Connected Enterprise. That is
trulyconnectedenterprise.com. That will be easy to remember.
Yeah. Bart, thank you so much for making time for us and sharing your just fascinating
Thank you for
experience
your trust, Pedro,
insight.
because I was really delighted when I got your invite, and I'm a fan now of your podcast. I listened to quite a number already. So
Thanks,
keep on
Bart. Appreciate that. All right, we'll say bye to the folks now until next time.
Till the next time.
We see a time when all business leaders using ServiceNow Performance Analytics will easily know how to leverage its power to help them reach their business goals. Performance Analytics offers you a way to do that. To discover how you can get there faster, send us an email to info@westburyanalytics.com.